Hi again. When it comes to portraits, there's an old saying that I always remember: expression over perfection. Because no matter how great your exposure, your lighting or composition, if your subjects don't have good expressions, the whole image may be ruined. Every photographer faces the real challenge of getting natural expressions from people, and especially getting them to smile naturally. I think that's because we see faces all the time. We've all become expert at detecting these false smiles. So here's a few tips that I've picked up over the years. Obviously, you have to consider your audience and use an idea that's appropriate. To start off with then, you generally want to approach your subjects with a warm smile and friendly demeanour, whoever they are, but especially if you don't know them. It's important not to rush into taking their photos. Have a chat first, get to know them, compliment them on something, maybe their hair, clothing or jewellery. Ask them about themselves, and so on. Teenagers can sometimes be a problem, especially if they're a bit shy. I sometimes ask them if they've been brought along kicking and screaming by their parents, or whether they came voluntarily. But if they're not very communicative, don't push it, just leave them alone and come back to them later. By the way, you have to be careful with very young children, especially at first if you don't know them, because sometimes you can start talking to them and they'll burst into tears at the strange new person in their face. But once they see you talking happily to a parent, they'll usually calm down. One thing I never usually do is just a standard, please smile for the camera. As I said before, that usually results in a fake smile, and it shows. So instead I might ask for a cheeky little smile, or I might say quickly in succession, give me a sad face, now give me an angry face, now a silly face, now give me a happy face. And then once they're finished, they generally have a small natural smile on their face. Take smiles to the next level by saying, give me a big smile. No, bigger than that, even bigger, now even bigger. Get a bit silly until their faces hurt. Remember, as in many of these tips, even though you'll carry on snapping during the silliness, they probably won't be keepers. What you're really looking for are those natural smiles that occur once the silliness dies down a bit. Ask for a fake laugh, maybe saying something like, let's see who's got the biggest, loudest, silliest fake laugh. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3, go! How you deliver the directions is important, so make it big and fun. Again, although you should carry on snapping, those images will not usually be keepers. The whole point here is not to capture the fake laugh, but to get the resulting real laughs and smiles that will occur naturally once things settle down. You need to make the request with enthusiasm to urge them on. One of the keys to good group posing is to get the heads close together. It's easy to compose a shot and makes people look like a tight unit. But especially with kids, it's not always easy to get them to go along with it. And some people just don't get close enough, especially if you put siblings together. So tell them to squish their cheeks together and real close. But don't stop there. Tell them to keep squishing tighter and tighter and tighter. Make sure to keep your camera at the ready for the moment right after they release the tight squish. You're bound to get some good smiles. Another one that can be quite effective for family interactions is to ask them, who's the silly one in the family? And get them to laugh at the silly one. Sometimes they all look at someone different, and after a second of bewilderment, they all start laughing. Or sometimes the silly one will go completely over the top with some kind of exaggerated laugh. Or maybe they'll have a big reaction that won't look natural. Pointing as well doesn't look too good, so if they're doing that, just ask them to put their hands down and to giggle quietly to themselves. Ask everyone to look at each other. This can sometimes produce great images. Generally speaking, people will initially make a face at the person they're looking at. Maybe they'll stick out their tongues. But once again, you should carry on shooting, knowing that the images won't be used, but eventually there'll be natural smiles and they're the images you want. You can continue by yelling, look at mum or look at dad, maybe. After using the previous tip, if you're shooting a couple, ask for one of them to look at the other person and for the other person to look at the camera. Then just maybe talk jokingly about the person looking at the camera. Oh, isn't he handsome? I bet you two never argue. Have you been taking handsome lessons? How do you put up with him? That type of thing. And because the person looking at the camera doesn't know what the other one is doing, this will usually get a good laugh. Using the most corny voice you can muster ever, ask a couple to stare lovingly into each other's eyes. Your voice and the situation will likely turn it into a smile or a laugh instead. Try asking people to stare at each other, but tell them they're not allowed to laugh. Usually they can't help themselves and start laughing after a few seconds. Ask a couple of people to sit back to back and then get one of them to push the other one. The other person should try to hold them back. You can get some great natural laughs doing this. I use it most of the time with youngsters. Okay, if you're easily offended, look away now. This is one where you have to judge your audience carefully. When shooting groups with children, I used to have good success with a remote-controlled fart machine. Farts are always funny. Once people would pose nicely, I'd hit the button a few times and say something like, "Who did that? Was that you? Oh, there he goes again. How rude." Sometimes I'd give the remote to a youngster and whisper to him to click it when no one was expecting. You can pick up those little machines quite cheaply on eBay. What about getting them to do a tickle fight? That's almost like cheating, isn't it? But it works so well, I don't care. Tickle fights usually devolve into a scrum on the floor, so bear in mind your perfect pose will usually unravel. But that's okay, the laughs will be worth it. Another technique that can work well just to get a natural expression is to ask the subject to look down and then up and then smile on the count of 3. Get them to look down at their feet and tell them when you count to 3, look up at me and smile. I'm not sure why this works, probably because you're catching them at a moment when they aren't thinking about their expressions. Once people are posed nicely, take your normal photo, but then ask them to hug or put their arm around the person next to them. You can get some really nice natural smiles in the hugging photos. Sometimes though, you get the real huggers that they'll turn right round and give mum or dad a real bear hug. And although it's a nice thing to do in real life, it doesn't work well for a photo. So just wait for them to turn round or ask them just to hug normally. If there's enough space, ask the family to walk towards you, but not to look at the camera. That's quite important. Instead, they should look at each other or just look around or towards the light, if possible, as they walk. If there's children involved and you have the technical know-how, get them to run towards you, but ask them to hold hands so that the faster runners don't get ahead and they all stay in a line. Actually, many people look down when they're running, so ask them to keep looking ahead or to the side. You can't really ask a child of, say, 4 or 5 years old to smile. If you do, you get something like this. No, with young children it's all about play, so get the parents to play with them. Maybe you can do something as simple as rolling a ball or throwing a ball and asking them to catch it. I found bubbles work quite well. To keep them in one place, you could put them inside a hula hoop laying on the ground and then play with them a bit. At least then they're standing in one spot. Ask everyone to shout out, "Stinky sausages!" That often gets a good reaction, but the parents should also join in. Ask them to jump up and down. Take some while they're in the air, but also after they've landed. That's usually when the expressions are best. This one works well. Ask a parent or sibling to stand behind you as you take the photos and make funny faces or do stupid things. One thing that I haven't mentioned is telling jokes. I started off trying this, but gave up. I don't think it works that well unless you tailor it perfectly to your audience. And if they don't find it funny, it's just embarrassing. So there you have it. Some ideas to help people smile and to get great expressions and reactions for a photo. Be confident and don't be afraid to make yourself look a bit silly. It's all part of the fun. And of course, it's the results that matter. Generally speaking, it's not what you say or do that will get someone to smile. It's how you say it and how you do it. Delivered the wrong way, all of these ideas could fall completely flat. But with the right approach, you can make people smile by saying, well, just about anything. You have to kind of make it a performance and you have to put your whole heart into it. And of course, you certainly wouldn't want to do all of these in one session. It would probably take ages and your subjects would wind up in an exhausted heap. And finally, remember to consider your audience. See how they're reacting to different suggestions. Some people love to get silly. Others will oblige, but are still a bit uncomfortable. You don't want to force it. Maybe just chat or start easy and gradually ramp up the silliness. If you don't think something is working, let the moment go and just move on to something else. You'll soon find a sweet spot for each session. Anyway, give some of these a try and see how you get on. Bye for now.